Brina, how do you do that?
You go to the start video button on the right. You go to video settings or choose virtual background, I think, and then you add the plus sign. It's just, this is not my room, so I'm like, I should probably have a virtual background.
Oh, I see. You can just like drop a picture in.
Yeah.
That's cool.
You see my face.
Choose one later.
Okay. All right. So I think as we can do some more discussion regarding the other two projects that we've been working on at a future date. Since we do have Corinne and Kurt on the line now, it might make a lot of sense to kind of reintroduce the Hidden Histories project, right? So this we've discussed and taken a look at some of Tomiko's work. You now should have seen some of Corinne's work that I passed along as well. So Corinne is coming on and can speak a little bit more to her engagement in this process in a second. But Corinne has come on into this project as a working artist, and so is going to be helping the Japanese American Museum kind of liaison with the artists. Let's see what else. I might just kind of pause there and let Corinne take over, and then I can plug in where it might make sense regarding some of the things that we've already discussed. But again, that Hidden Histories project, that is the augmented reality project that is being supported by the Japanese American Museum with help from artist Tomiko Teal and obviously Corinne. I've stepped in as kind of a technical liaison with you all, so you know your role there. So we're going to be walking through the pipeline that will be given over to the artists as well. We're going to be kind of the front end, right? First, working on the front end of this to help the artists with the deployment as it moves through the pipeline as needed. And we're also going to be kind of using the application as it stands from Tomiko's server. We're going to be helping with that transition onto the Hidden Histories server and working through any of the technical glitches that might kind of come up through that process as well. So that will be, and those roles will continue to be kind of redefined and developed as we move through this process, since it's very likely, depending on the timeline, it's very likely that we'll be doing a lot of the kind of technical support via Zoom. So we're going to continue to kind of redefine and develop the best ways to do that together. Okay, so without further ado, I think I asked Corinne to come in and talk a little bit about her own practice and then also talk about her involvement in Hidden Histories, because so much of what we're discussing in this art fieldwork course is exactly that. What does it look like to work as an artist with institutions? And I think Corinne's actually inadvertently like the perfect candidate to kind of speak to that, especially in terms of this project, because she's doing a little bit of both. Thank you for joining us, Corinne.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's nice to meet you all in this unusual time. And I think this project is going to be a really important model for, how do we map forward keeping communities connected in virtual space. So it's now estimated that this COVID-19 will actually be impacting communities for 18 months. I don't know if you have all seen that news. The grant that's funding this is a Knight Foundation Innovation and Technology Grant, and I believe only 5 organizations nationwide received it. And the Japanese American Museum of San Jose is the smallest organization that received the grant. And I think what the Knight Foundation was interested in was how might a small organization deeply engage community in the history of its space as it changes with gentrification. And how do we add those layers? How might we use augmented reality as an accessible community tool, engaging not just artists who have experience with AR or who might not, but the community as a whole. And so I come into this as an artist. I do a lot of, well, just to back up as to who I am, and then I'll go more deeply into the project. And Rhonda, can you time me and just make sure I'm only going like for 10 minutes and no more than that?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to go for long. So I studied design at Stanford University. They have a very bad design program, at least when I was there. And I think I had one of the few degrees that you could graduate from that school and go to interviews and have people look at you and look at your resume and say, oh, they have a really crappy program. I think that's changed over time, but it was very humbling. Luckily, my dad's a toy designer, and I knew I had to have a portfolio. So it doesn't matter where you go to school, it matters what you do and what's your portfolio. And that's always been the case. And even more so now with the need to blend technology and art in innovative ways. I started working with museums. So my first career, though, was in doing gaming. So I did gaming assets, so animated cursors, seamless backgrounds, storyboarding for multiplayer games when they weren't really existing yet. And so I'd hop from different teams to different teams across Silicon Valley, really working a lot with people with different skill sets. And I think that's really important too as an artist. I actually really enjoy working with people who are more technical and people who aren't artists. Working with artists is like herding cats, which is fine. But when you're doing collaborative work, it's really great to work with engineering teams because they understand being on teams. And you really know your domain and how to communicate that. So I started off in the gaming world, and then I transitioned to museums. So I started doing artwork in museum spaces, and I learned that there was such a thing as museum educational design departments. And I got really excited about working with those departments within the museums. So I had a residency at the De Young Museum, and a lot of that was creating workshops for people to do activities that simulated components of my work. And so pretty much ever since then, I've been doing artwork, usually technology-based, that maybe has a component that I've created. It's a conversation engagement starter piece. But then what I'm really interested in is what do people do with that? What are their voices that they can bring to the conversation with those particular tools? I work mostly in East San Jose, in Japantown, and I write lots of grants. So if you want to drive your own direction and your own explorations, you have to learn grant writing. And it took me a while to do that. It took me a long while. And I have a nice binder about this thick of rejection letters that I learned from each one. And that has really informed what I do now with this project. So with this project, I am creating the call for artists, which was a really odd situation because we couldn't announce how much the funding was with the AB5 issues. Luckily, we had applicants, even though we weren't really stating how much we were giving as a stipend, creating the contracts and mapping out how might we engage with the community over this, not just the artists, and how might we create the process of the whole journey, have that be celebrated, not just the outcome. So I'm going to stop there because I know there's probably questions. I don't want to go over.
Well, you're fine. You're fine. And so one of the things that I think stood out to me, and we've been working with as I mentioned, the San Jose Museum, but also with an independent artist on kind of technical deployment. And one of the things that stood out to me, and I think we've worked through as a team, is that how do you when you say working with a team of engineers is actually much easier than working with artists in some capacity. And as somebody who's worked as a kind of technical support for several artists in the past, the artist brain, we just and I see myself switch, right? I know when I'm working as an artist, like that like all of the skills that I have and all of the tools that I have as an engineer, it turns off when I'm working on my own projects in some way. So I've tried to create tools so that I can kind of, and I don't know if this is true for you, as somebody who's worked in kind of both technical, but also in artistic applications, for an artist, since these are all artists as well, before we kind of move into some of the hidden histories and other conversations, how do you manage those two various roles for yourself, right? The kind of identity as an artist, the identity as a kind of grant writer, or as a liaison within an institution, and then some of the kind of technical and engineering components.
Well, I think as an independent artist, you always have to wear multiple hats. And that's just the way it is. And you grow into them. I also think there's a fusing of those roles. So, being an artist, I bring my artistic eye to when I'm doing CAD design, or I don't really separate it out. but I do find that I'm working with purely artists is different vocabulary that I'm using. It's a different toolkit of vocabulary. I find myself going more into, so a lot of what I do also is with biomaterial design, and I run a camp at Stanford for teens that explores bioengineering and biomaterial design. I think there's so much intersectionality now, and I really feel like the domain separations were artificial, but I think temperaments aren't. So I think there's an artistic temperament that I think is easy to lean on when you're among artists, and then there's more of a problem-solving engineering temperament that in vocabulary, we kind of gravitate to when we're doing more problem-solving, using art as a toolkit more in the design sphere. And to be honest, I am more interested in that at this point in my career because I'm more interested in questions and engaging the public in questions. It's not so much my own voice that I want to put out there. I'm more interested in how might technology facilitate conversations and the voices that are underrepresented, and give them access to these tools that they often don't have access to. So while we're here in Silicon Valley, we have wide swaths of demographics that aren't in the conversation, that don't feel like they're part of Silicon Valley and aren't in innovation conversations. And so I think hidden history is really important in this too, because it's bringing a bit of vocabulary to a public, multiple publics, a changing demographic, a changing neighborhood, and having them all converse around a particular thing that's kind of foreign but interesting, and some will come at it with expertise in the history of the town, of that neighborhood, and some will come at it with expertise in the tool, and how do we create a space that respects both and brings them together. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that kind of brief introduction. Are there questions? I also want to open up this questions for students. Do you have questions for Corinne? We're okay? I've found in the online format, the kind of group conversations can be a little bit like, it's not as organic, but if you
I think they happen more in the chat. So I always keep an eye in the chat because sometimes that's where it happens. One other thing I want to say, I do a lot of public art as well. So I work with civic institutions. So like I work with the VTA, Caltrans, the city. I do public transit art enhancements. And I think part of the reason I was invited to Hidden Histories is I've been involved in that particular site, that lot that used to be Highlandville. And I actually have artifacts that I want to show your students. These are from the dig. So,
amazing.
Yeah, and I actually have a whole bunch of these sake bottles, which amazingly didn't break. But there was a time when there were both Chinese and Japanese in that space. They both were being restricted in terms of who could come into the United States. So we had a huge demographic of single men, Chinese and Japanese men. And they weren't allowed to bring families in. Women were restricted to come in. So a lot of their socializing was around drinking. So we have a lot of these.
And Corinne, will you just back up a few steps and share with the students the lot that you're talking about and how you came across these? Yeah,
so in Japantown, so I'll back up to Japantown, San Jose. It is the only Japantown in the United States that is in the same spot it was before incarceration. So Japanese incarceration during World War II, all the mainland Japanese were incarcerated in camps across California and Montana and some other states. When they got out of those incarceration camps after World War II, none of them went back to the original Japantowns. Their property, their farms, everything was taken from them, except for Japantown, San Jose, where people were able to come back to their storefronts. People saved it for them and start up again. So it's very unique in that way. That is the only Japantown that is exactly in the same spot as it was before and after World War II.
And do you have a sense of what it was that was different about San Jose in particular? That
I think that's a question for Kurt. I'm half Japanese, but my family's from Hawaii. And they did not come to the mainland at that time. So the only people from Hawaii who were sent to incarceration were Japanese instructors and religious leaders. Kurt, do you know why?
Let me see, I'm unmuting myself. The Santa Clara Valley was uniquely open to Asians after World War II. And so a lot of Japanese from other towns in California actually came to the Santa Clara Valley. And we were also very lucky in that some Caucasians actually watched over the properties while the Japanese were incarcerated and actually, protected them. And when the Japanese came back, actually gave the property back to the original owners. So we were very, very lucky that the Santa Clara Valley was open to the Japanese Americans, more tolerant than the rest of the state, and B, that the Japanese were able to hold on to some of the properties after World War II.
Thank you.
I
Thank
mean,
you, Kurt.
that's a really short answer.
Yeah, I'm sure it could be a whole class, right? Yeah.
I want to show a few more artifacts.
Thank you.
These are old bowls that were also from the Highlandville dig. So this lot that we're talking about in Japantown is, let's see, it's between Jackson and Taylor. Is it between 6th and 7th, Kurt? I think it's at 6th and 7th, Jackson Taylor. It was a municipal bus yard for decades. Is that right, Kurt?
Yes, it's between 6th and 7th and Taylor and Jackson.
Yeah. And it was a Chinatown. So Highlandville's a German name. There was a man named Heinlein, and he created this space for the Chinese because there actually were 5 Chinatowns in San Jose before Highlandville, and they were all burned down. They were all chased out of where they were. The one that was before Highlandville was Market Street, and that went up in flames. And Connie Young Yu, who Kurt's interviewed, speaks to that in some of her interviews. But Highlandville was created by this German immigrant. I believe he had 2 daughters, and it was a walled, locked community in those blocks. And it was locked to protect the inhabitants, the Chinese. And slowly those locks came off and the walls came down and the community grew. But it was there to protect them against just the real hatred that was, percolating and present in California at that time. It's interesting to note that the real intersection between the Caucasian community around Chinatown happened during Chinese New Year when there were fireworks. And so moments of celebration were a moment for kind of that intersectionality. I had an artifact that I wanted to share with you. And there were lots of these. This is a cow bone. And all the samples I'm showing you are from Sonoma State's Anthropological Study Center. And they loaned me and kind of gifted me a box of artifacts. They had a ton of these from the dig site at Highlandville. What this is an artifact of multiculturalism. The Chinese would go to Italian and Irish butchers, buy a big thing of meat, because that's how it's sold in Western butchers. But Asians, we use chopsticks. We never have a big thing of meat that we cook. So they would take it home, and they had these little tiny hacksaws. They would cut them up into small pieces so they could cook it and put it in their stews and their noodles and their rice. And so if you look at all these really carefully, you can see the little tiny saw lines. There's a pattern on there on both sides. And so it's just kind of a beautiful artifact of that history of, making do with what you have and then modifying it to your own cultural cooking practices. And they would just throw the bones behind their lots, and then it was part of the, the layers of the dig. So I wanted to show you those because there were a ton of those, and they're just, I think, pretty cool. Right now, I'm going to,
I was just going to say, I love that you've identified those as these kind of artifacts, literally artifacts of that kind of intersectionality and that kind of cross-cultural milieu that must have been happening at the time. To have an index of that, or something that you can point back to kind of show that that was obviously happening is really interesting, and something that might not necessarily on first glance appear right to kind of evoke those things. I think is really interesting to think about that in terms of augmented reality, right, in this process, so that you can start to reveal literally the hidden history that's in that artifact.
Yeah, and I'm glad you say that, because it is these little simple things that reveal more deeply. Another example, and I'm not sure if you got this recorded, Kurt, but the story Connie Young Yu shared about her grandmother passing a basket back and forth with a Japanese mother, and they couldn't communicate because Han Yang-Yi's mother spoke Chinese, probably Cantonese at that time. Now we have mostly Mandarin speakers, but at the time it was mostly Cantonese speakers. And then a woman from Japan, probably Southern Japan. They did not speak the same language, but they passed the same basket back and forth. And the Japanese mother would put tofu in the basket, and her mother would put, I can't remember, Kurt, do you want to share that a little bit? I just think it's a beautiful story, the basket. I just think it's so cool.
Right. The Japanese woman and the Chinese woman couldn't speak to each other, but they were neighbors, friends, and they would pass things. Japanese produce would go to the Chinese person, and the Chinese person would send a Chinese produce back to the Japanese, and they would share food and items, even though the two of them could not speak to each other. They had completely different languages, but it points out to how multicultural Japantown really was, and how there was a tightness in the community.
Oh, that's great. That's a lovely story. Thank you.
So those are two of the communities we're focusing on. The third one is Pinoy Town. And a lot of people, including myself, didn't know that there was a Filipino community that was deeply embedded in the area. And so part of this AR project is to also highlight and surface those stories. And then down the line, we're hoping that we can highlight other communities that are in the space. There's a lot of Ethiopians, there's many different communities that are kind of percolating around. If you look at the schools in the area, most of them, I think it's about 80% Hispanic. So it is multicultural today, and it's part of its history to change. But as we move into this period where these big buildings are coming up, it's really being gentrified, the tofu shop has changed, so much is changing. How might this project capture a little bit of those intersectionalities and hidden stories of how we are one community, and while at the same time preserving the uniqueness of the individual community? So that's what the challenge kind of is.
Yeah. I want to open it up to the students in case there's questions coming from the students about the kind of conceptual conceit of the project and some of the history behind it. No?
I don't have a question, but I like what's going on because I'm also from like the area, and my parents would tell me about how there's like a Chinatown, and being like a Chinese and then growing up in this Japanese like neighborhood, it's just really cool to see the artifacts and everything, and see like rediscovering what my parents have told me. Like when the benches came out, I remember that wasn't there originally, and then seeing how Japantown's changed over time. I used to dance hula at the halau in Japantown too, so just seeing how things change and what's going on and how we're kind of like reliving the history is like amazing.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So many of us commute into San Jose too, and so thinking about ways that San Jose has like this deep history, and also like from somebody who's grown up in the city versus folks who are maybe kind of finding it as a temporary or kind of a now home. Thinking about ways that it can both kind of support, students who come into its center and then maybe kind of, go elsewhere, but also how do all of those kind of like long-term community members interact with the student population, and then this kind of, as you're talking about the tech community that is this kind of overlay on top, right? And in many ways, the tech community has a very different interest in San Jose than students coming to an institution that's been there for a very long time as well. Are there any other comments or questions, or is this sparking ideas for anyone?
I have a curiosity. I'm not from San Jose, I'm from Mountain View, and I grew up going to San Francisco Chinatown often. I lived in China a couple of years, but since I transferred here, I've been going to Japantown quite often. And I noticed that on the side, there's actually a Filipino church. And beside it, there's actually a restaurant for African Americans, or just anyone who can go. My curiosity is I just think that it does traces back to the history of how it's multi-cultural. It's like, I didn't think that I could find other communities besides Japan, like the Japanese community in Japantown. And I'm not sure what the history of the root of that place or that corner street is. So that's just my thoughts on that and just my comments.
Kurt, are you aware? Yeah.
Yeah, the 6th Street is really a confluence of many cultures. It was the side of the street that still exists was across the street from the original Chinatown, which is now this big development. But on that side of the street in 1943, you have the establishment of an African-American church, which is now a prayer garden. And that community is very, very active, including the restaurant you were mentioning. That property is owned by the Prayer Garden Church. And also the Filipinos had several businesses on that side of the street. And now I think the only remaining place is the Filipino Community Center, which is on 6th Street. They also have the North Side Center, which is a little bit farther down by Empire Street. So yeah, it's amazing. 6th Street was kind of the intersection of where the Japanese, the Filipinos, the African Americans, and the Chinese all came together, including some Italians too.
Thank you for.
I wish my book were still in print, because the book that came out back in 2014, which is like really thick, talks about all of that.
Oh, wow.
Do we have that at the MLK library?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, if you go up to the California room, Ralph Pierce was one of the co-authors with me.
Ah, that's fantastic.
Oh, wow.
Would you remind me what is the name of your book?
It's called San Jose Japantown: The Journey.
Oh, I love that. The journey.
So,
okay.
yeah,
It's going in our.
If you go up to the California room, Ralph will probably regale you with all kinds of stories.
I think we're gonna have to. That's absolutely on the docket. What I love about this little conversation, not little, but like a part of the conversation, is that you're taking a lived experience, right? And you're kind of synthesizing it through the lens of this project, and then able to connect through Kurt to like a kind of a preserved history or an archive of that site. And I'm just wondering if there's ways that because this augmented reality app will live, I'm imagining for a while, not just the duration of the semester or the fall events, but it kind of will stay open and available. I'm just thinking about ways that what just happened might also be triggered through an augmented reality experience, right? Like I've always wondered about this site, or kind of, just having the frame or the lens with which to kind of start thinking about where you are situated and where you are as not just like a blank slate for your own kind of experience, but actually has deep roots and deep meaning, and those things are still embedded in the site. And your presence at that site, is interacting with that and modifying that for different people. So I think that the augmented reality experience in terms of what just happened and potential for people could be really powerful. So that's terribly, terribly exciting. So one of the things that I want everyone to also kind of, so I was connected to Hidden Histories through Molly Hankovitz at San Jose State, because she knows Tomiko and became aware of this project. Meanwhile, I was working on a cultural mapping project with Revati in the English department, which has a very similar kind of conceptual conceit, which is using some sort of mapping platform, not necessarily augmented reality, but for oral narratives, different types of San Jose stories that are coming from the community that are kind of telling a type of story that isn't the dominant narrative as of like Silicon Valley as kind of tech capital, but as some other types of narratives. And so this project obviously intersects with the Hidden Histories. And so some of my initial kind of meetings were because of that intersection of the two projects. So Kurt, it would be great as a segue if you would consider kind of putting your book, so to speak, on the map as well, and then maybe like we could talk about ways that the cultural mapping projects might connect with some of your kind of research as well. Cool. Yay, thank you. All right, so without further ado, Corinne, is there anything in this conversation that you would want to round out before we kind of pivot and start looking at a very different type of brain set where we start looking at the Unity interface?
No, I'm just really excited to be a part of this journey and to hear what your students have to say too. It's really wonderful to hear a young person's lens, you know, whether they're from, like Lauren said, she's from here, and then we heard from Sabrina, she's learning and she comes down. So I just think it's really neat to hear multi-generational. So I guess that's the thing I'd want to round out with, is that this project is going to be really multi-generational. And I think we often are in our silos generation-wise in Silicon Valley, kind of hang out and engage with just our peers. And I'm hoping that this can be a model for how can we find space, community space online, and just hopefully sometime in person, but to work across generations. So yeah, I love the comments that everyone had.
And I'm sure there'll be more that kind of arise. And so maybe part of what we can do in class, now that we'll have more breathing room for this project, part of what we can do in class is maybe start thinking about our own relationship to some of these sites and come up with these kind of markers or indicators in San Jose that we would, if we were kind of given this same assignment, how would we respond? And I actually think that, especially since we're kind of removed physically from site and from one another right now, this could be a really interesting way to conceive of that. So we're going to walk through a technical demo of this, but I think what I'd actually like to do as far as our kind of assignment for the technical demo is maybe beta test some of these concepts, right? Like how would you guys, if you were one of the artists who were selected for this project, how would you respond to the prompts? And I'll have you all, even if we can't physically go together to these sites, what we'll do is kind of run through a beta test of the augmented reality platform using our own stories. Yeah, awesome, great. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you all, if you haven't already, to open up Unity. Was everybody, I checked in earlier, but I wanna check in again, make sure everybody was able to download Unity.
Yes.
Yes, fantastic. It's a big download, so it takes a little while. I wanted to make sure you got it. All right, I'm gonna move in and I'm gonna start sharing my second screen. Oh. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna start a new project. Do you all have, which version of Unity are you, is it 2019 that you're using?
I think mine might be. I definitely did not upload the new or update it since last year.
Okay, I'm gonna
I think mine's 2020.
So
the old stuff.
So we can, the unit UI, the user interface is more or less the same. If you run into any moments where there's like a difference, let me know, and you can share your screen and I can help with the navigation. So I'm gonna start a new Unity project. I'm gonna call this Hidden Histories. And then my last name, if you would all do the same. Maybe Hidden Histories test 1.
Hey Rhonda.
Yeah.
I logged into my Unity and it says that I have no license.
You shouldn't need a license. Did you have something set up with a
I got it for 108, but I was the artist, so I never really got to explore the program, but I don't think I even, like, do I have to log in or?
let me see. I'm gonna go back to Unity Hub.
But yeah, because like I'm not on this. Looks like you're like inside the program.
Can you share your screen with me?
Oh wait. Yeah. Let me see.
There's a Unity collab, which is a cloud-based, but this is a kind of an application based on the computer.
It says you might need to stop sharing it so I can share it for like 2 seconds.
Oh, am I?
Yeah. Okay. Let me see.
Oh.
Can you see?
Something happened.
Should I retry it?
Hold on. Okay, yeah, I got it.
Oh, okay.
So, all right. Under, go down to installs. Okay, and then you're gonna need to add. I think.
Oh.
Yeah. And then, sure, the 2019.
Oh, is this downloading it?
Yeah, it might be a second. So
okay.
you will not need the, are you on a Mac or Windows?
Mac.
So uncheck the Windows build support.
And
then for our purposes today, we're gonna build for our own systems. For our kind of, when we're working with artists, they're actually going to need to be able to bundle for both iOS and Android, but it's that's a lot of downloads. So in order to make it as light as possible, I'm just going to ask you to iOS, Mac, and then will you scroll down, continue to scroll down a little bit?
And that's it right there.
Okay, and scroll up again. Let's make sure we're just, yeah, that all looks great. Done.
Okay.
Cool. So depending on the speed of your internet, and the internet right now is very slow, lots of people on it. So we'll see how long that takes. But in the interim, you can kind of follow. I'm not gonna go too deep into application until I can check back with you to make sure you've got it.
Okay, cool. And then I'll just like write stuff down like in the meantime.
Perfect. I also have, since we haven't done the Vuforia tutorial together, Rachel.
I don't think so. I mean, like all of us?
No, I've done the Vuforia tutorial in like my 107 class, and then in like a breakout session.
I don't think so, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, either, yeah.
Okay, so what I'll do is set up, I'll give you guys the link to that workflow. It's different than what will be used in the hidden histories, but it gives you a pipeline that's kind of internal for quick testing. So you can start thinking about this beta test for the augmented reality for hidden histories.
Is that in reference for Unity? So like the demo that you'll send, just so we can get more familiarized with Unity on our own?
Yeah, I can share it with everyone. So if you haven't done the augmented reality with Vuforia with me in the past, you can use that tutorial to kind of just like meander around Unity, because the workflow up until a certain point will be the same either way.
Yeah. Okay, because I'm in the same boat as Rachel. I had Unity for 108, but I also was the artist, so I didn't really have to utilize it that much. So I just want to make sure I can familiarize myself outside of today's.
And what I'll do too is maybe I'll send it out for everyone to review, and then maybe next class we'll walk through the entire Vuforia pipeline together.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Yeah. We'll see how much time we have today too, how far we can get. Okay, so I am going to try to find share. There we are. Okay. Jasmine, were you able to download Unity?
I'm downloading the newest version because I think my old one's really old.
Okay.
And I don't want to fall behind, so I just want to get the newest one.
Yeah. So I'll kind of just review the user interface,
Right.
and then I'll check back in with the two of you to see how your download is before we start moving in. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Also, if I don't have it, it kind of works better for me to just pay attention diligently and take notes and then go through it after.
Sure. I totally understand. Especially with the, I have the luxury, I have an external monitor, so I'm using two screens for all of the in-class kind of Zoom-based meetings. If you guys have access to a second monitor, it makes it so much easier, but I understand how difficult that can be sometimes. So I'll keep that in mind for sure. Okay.
Well, yeah.
All right, so if you've created a new project and named it something like Hidden Histories, Test 1 with your last name, it should, and are you all seeing my screen here, the Unity here?
Yeah.
Yes, fantastic. All right, so I'm just gonna start with some, actually I am not going to, because my menu is over here. I'm gonna have to do another type of share. I'm sorry. Hold on just 1 minute. Zoom. New share desktop 1. Okay. There, now I've got my menu. All right, do you see this desktop now? Yes.
Unity?
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to start. So this hierarchy, right, is more or less the same thing as our outliner in Maya 3D or our kind of like our layers in Photoshop. So it's going to have all of the objects, everything that you're working with in your scene, which is just to the right. This is our 3D viewport. Every object, or what we call asset in Unity, all of our assets are going to be listed here. So I can click on the main camera. It will select my main camera in my scene, my 3D viewport. I can select my directional light. So you get one camera and one light for free anytime you open up a new scene. You can zoom in and out using your kind of a 2-finger drag if you're using a trackpad in Unity, or if you're using a mouse, you can use like that middle wheel mouse button, and then shift and middle mouse button click, or shift, no, what is it? Shift option?
I think shift and then the rolly.
Was it?
The shift and then rolly for the mouse. You can like pan.
Shift and what?
Sorry, the roll. I have a weird mouse. This rolly.
Oh yeah, no, the middle mouse button. Yeah, the shift and the middle mouse button. But I'm trying to remember what the hotkey is for. I don't use Unity very frequently with my trackpad, but it might. I'll create a demo that has all of the hotkeys for trackpad use. But yeah, shift and then middle mouse button, or the wheel will allow you to pan, and then you can right click and then kind of rotate around your scene. If you ever get lost in your scene, you can always, click and select your objects from the scene window or your 3D viewport as well. If you ever get lost, you can always go into your window. Oh no. Oh no. So there it is. It's under edit and then frame selected, and then it will reframe to your viewport in case you kind of scroll around and get lost in your window. Okay, so this is where all of the assets that are in your scene will be located. Under that sample scene hierarchy, this tab is our project tab. So it's going to show you, for free, we get these folders called assets, scenes, and then packages. You can use these drop-down windows, drop-down arrows to see what actually is included in each one of these folders and directories. For now, we're going to just use the kind of folder system as is. And then when you switch over into these top two tabs between project and console, the console is going to show you any errors that might come up in your program. So frequently, like, it's kind of your debug window for those of you that use script editors for writing code. This will show you all the errors that might come up. So Unity is an interesting package and UI, and I don't know, we didn't, in my 102, this is our kind of introduction to 3D modeling and printing. I don't get into many scripts, but in Unity, you frequently will, right? So you're using bits of code in concert with objects and kind of more graphical user interface more frequently in Unity than you do in other programs. Unity native language is C+, so it's a little bit different language than we've been using probably in your other classes. So typically you probably use HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Java. So in Unity land, we use C+, or sometimes called, we'll come back to that. So just, we'll be adding some little bits of code into our projects today. And we're going to be adding that into a folder that we add into our projects. So let's actually do that now. Well, I'm going to we'll take a little bit of a break and then we'll come back and do that. All right, so the other thing that everybody select your main camera right now, who can. With your main camera selected, you'll see all of the attributes associated with the camera come up in a tab over here called Inspector. So Inspector shows you things like, where is your camera located? That is the position in terms of X, Y, and Z. If I can type in, different parameters, and it will actually move my camera in space over here on the X-axis. I'll move it back to 0. And then on the Y-axis, it's 1. If I type in 10, you can see it move up. This is a Y up coordinate system. I'm going to turn that back to 1. And then Z is actually kind of set at -10 so that it's looking at position 0, 0, 0, but it's kind of backed up from that. So if I type in 0, for instance, it moves to the center origin. You can see it's now kind of stacked on top of the sun, this directional light. I'm going to type in -10 again. All right, so that's position, rotation, and scale. With your objects selected, just like in Maya, you can use the same hotkeys, W, E, and, oops. Maybe not for let's see, W, E, yeah. So with your object selected, I'm sorry, I was still in my selection for position. But with your object selected, you can use W, E, and R to get your toggle between translate, rotate, and scale. So again, with a camera, the scale is less important, but you can rotate, so change your position. You can see when I have my camera selected, in my little camera preview window, when I rotate it, the horizon is kind of moving as I rotate the camera's position. And same thing, like you can grab these handles and move and rotate in the X along the Y axis, and blue again is the Z axis here. And you can also, if you kind of do some rotations and you want to go back to 0, you can always go back, select your object, go back into the inspector, and then 0 out all of your rotations through the window here. So I'm back at 0, 0, 0. And same thing for scale. The same is true for any object that you bring in to the viewport, but we'll talk about that in a second. We're not going to deal too much except for these clipping planes here. This is set so that it will not render anything that's closer than 0.3 units to the camera, and it won't render anything that's further than 1,000 units from the camera. So you like know in video games sometimes when an object gets too close, you start to see through component parts of it, or you can't see things that are too far away. That's just so that you don't overwhelm Unity. In augmented reality space, you might need to adjust these clipping planes based on if you want to overlay an object. Let's say you're using, there's two methods that we'll be using for augmented reality. Let me back up a little bit. The first is an image trigger, which I think a lot of us might have seen or used in the past. And so that's using a video camera to find an image, and when the camera sees an image, it then brings up whatever kind of augmented or virtual object or image or sound or video you want the application to present. Another type of trigger is location based. So this if you have location services turned on your phone, for instance, and you enter into a certain location, you can bring up an object. And usually with those location based, the objects might be quite large in the scene. So if you're not seeing your 3D objects being rendered, if parts of it are getting cut off, you'd want to adjust this clipping plane of both the near and the far. Other than that, I actually don't think that, and these might be overridden. I'm not sure exactly how Tomiko and Peter's code works, but all of this might get overridden when we bundle out our assets. And I have a feeling that they're handling their own camera settings in the AR Poise, and that's the position based, and then AR VOS, which is the image based augmented reality platforms that we'll use, that they actually wrote. But just for our purposes today, I wanted to make notes of that. And that's certainly true of the Vuforia pipeline. Frequently you'll need to reset those. How are we doing on the downloads?
Mine is like halfway.
Okay.
Like a quarter.
So that is kind of like, before I get into too much else, I'd like you all to like be able to kind of mess around with the UI. So what I'm going to recommend is that we actually take our break in class right now, and we can hopefully the rest of the download will complete, and then we can come back together and walk through adding assets into our scene, native assets that come through Unity, but then also I'm going to show you how to bring in a Maya file directly as is and drag into the environment, and we can use our Maya files. So it's much easier to model, to edit models, to kind of sculpt in Maya space, and then bring into Unity.
Sweet.
Sound good? Corinne and Kurt, is that amenable for you all if we take a quick break now and then meet back at, let's say 4:15?
Sounds good.
Sounds
okay,
good.
Great. I'll see you all shortly. Hello.
So mine is, now it's halfway done.
Did it go backwards?
It might not be ready. But if you said you're gonna send like a video that we can kind of follow along.
Yeah, well, I think actually Kurt is recording this, so he might be able to send a link back to us for this video. And then there's there's tutorials that I'll be sending out that give an overview as well. We'll diverge a little bit from the tutorials that I'll send to you for the augmented reality using Vuforia, but there is a text-based tutorial that we've implemented for the asset bundle preparation, so you'll have access to both of those.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Cool. Okay. Is everybody? Hi, Ivy.
Ooh, we're masking her.
Masking. I know. I was playing around. I turned it off because I was trying to like use props in my previous class, and it kept disappearing stuff.
Yeah. Like that water bottle. I'm drinking fall.
Exactly. What it was literally a glass that I was trying to use. Okay. Well, we're probably all back. Hi, Yay. Hi. Yay, we're all here.
That's awesome.
Okay. Okay, great. So Lauren shared, I don't know if you saw in the comments, Lauren shared, I'm going to share my screen again, if it's not already. Yep, sure. Hotkeys, a link to the hotkeys. So this is a much more comprehensive, so it will show you the Unity's hotkeys, right? So it looks like Q for pan, W to move, E rotate, scale. And then let's try Q. Yeah, Q over here will allow you to pan, and your trackpad or left mouse button will allow you to pan. And then go back here. Where did I lost my menu. And well, that's yeah. Control an option on a Mac at least will allow me to left button and rotate. So Q to pan, and then option to rotate using the trackpad. Thank you, Lauren. Even if you're still here with us.
Here for a little bit.
For a little bit. When do you need to leave?
Like in like 5 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, quick. No, for you, I think you've covered most of what we'll cover today. So, all right. So, for those of you that are unable to use Unity right now, go ahead and just keep watching my screen, and then all of this is actually covered in the tutorials that I'll send out. All right, so as I've mentioned, this is our sample scene, the list of all of our objects and assets inside of our sample scene. I'm gonna go into our Unity menu under File, and I'm going to say New Scene. And scenes have been modified. Do you want to change them? I'm gonna say Don't Save. And now see scene, rather than sample scene, we have this untitled scene. I'm going to say File, Save As, and that's going to allow me to save this scene. And it's asking me where I want to put the saved scene inside of. I'm actually going to say instead of just assets, I want to go into scenes. And you can see that sample scene that we were working on before is already saved inside of Unity. So this is a new scene. Now the reason in Maya, we've used scenes in workflow probably very nominally, if at all. In Unity, it becomes really important because frequently you're working on games that have like a level inside and then something happens outside, right? And you have different rules or different characters for each. So you're building out scenes for different kind of game environments. For our purposes, we're going to be working inside of one scene, but I want to just show this feature to you. So I'm going to save this scene as Hidden Histories Test, and then save. So now I can see it says Hidden Histories Test up here. I spelled it a little bit funny. That's fine. Rhonda's signature move. So hidden histories test inside. Again, we get a main camera and a directional light for free inside of this scene.
I'm gonna head out, but thank you for meeting everyone, and hope to hear more next week.
Absolutely, Lauren. Good luck on your midterm.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay. All right. So now down in our assets, in our project outliner, you can see those same folders that I just saved through. In assets, there's a folder called scenes, and now we have both our hidden histories and our sample scene. So I want to make a couple new folders before I move too much further inside of our assets folder. This is going to be a workflow for hidden histories specific. So we want to create 3 new folders. So you can click on assets and then right click, or up here in the, if you click on assets folder and then under assets in the top menu, you can create new and folder that way as well. So the first one we're going to call capital A, and naming is really important in Unity since it's a script-based programming environment. The standard nomenclature for naming variables in other code environments holds true. So you don't want any special characters and no spaces. You'll actually, it'll throw you, it'll tell you if you're using characters that you can't use in folders, but just for your own edification, we're gonna name everything, and everything for now, for these 3 folders needs to be very specific, because the code that we'll be embedding later is going to be looking for these folders with these names. So it's capital A, SSET, asset, bundles, capital B, UNDLES. So that is our first folder under our kind of main folder called assets. And then we're going to create a new folder, another new folder. So you can click on assets again and then go up to assets, create new, and then folder. And then the second one is going to be called editor, capital EDITOR. And then we're going to do the same thing. You can also right click in this space and say create folder. And then this is going to be called materials. And I lied. It's actually not 3 folders that we're creating. It's 4. Materials. And then again, I can right click or right click on assets or go up into assets and create new folder. And this one is called prefabs, capital PREFABS. Okay, so now under our assets menu in our project window, you should see assets is the top folder, and then below that asset bundles, editor, materials, prefabs, and then our default scenes, and we should have 2 in there now. You can toggle between scenes. You can under file, you can say open scene, and then under your scenes, you can toggle between the 2 scenes that you've created. But for now, I'm just going to stay in our hidden histories test scene that I've created. Okay. So now we're going to add some components. So now we've kind of got the basics set up. Actually, there's one more thing that we'll need to change before we move on. So before we do anything else, I'd also recommend that we switch to our build settings. So this is what Unity is going to package for. So when you're using Unity, you can package for an app, you can package for a PC platform, or you can package for various platforms. So that was when we looked at Rachel when she was doing her installation. Rachel uses a Mac and an iPhone, so I had her use the package for a Mac computer, and also for an iOS, which is all of our iPhones and iPads are running iOS. So we're going to go up into File and change our build settings from the standard, which is these PC, Mac, and Linux standalone. And I'm going to change it for my phone. And since I have an iPhone, I'm going to change it to iOS. And all the defaults for now on iOS. And then I click switch platforms, and that's going to actually kind of go in and make some settings changes that can take a little bit of time.
Should we change it to whatever platform we're going to be using?
Yeah, change it to your phone platform, or if you're using a tablet, whatever platform. So Android or your iOS, and the default settings are fine.
So I click iOS and it doesn't, the switch platform tab isn't highlighted.
You might need to install it. Did you install it?
Yeah, you
with
have to
Unity?
download and install the thing. It's pretty hefty though, each add-on.
Oh.
So for you, Martin, don't worry about that right now. We'll wait on the export for you until next class, because it will be a hefty download. You can still work through the workflow with all of us
sure,
without the actual exporting.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. So now I've got my scene set up. I have my folders that I need. I've switched my platform for a development pipeline to package for my phone. And now I can start adding some assets into my scene. So the first thing I'm going to do is go up to game object. And this is going to be primarily when you start building assets. A lot of them will come through these game objects. For today, we're going to just be using these 3D objects. So you can add a cube, a sphere, a capsule, a cylinder, a plane. I'm going to recommend that we add instead of planes, let's do a volumetric object. So a cylinder, capsule, sphere. I'm going to add a capsule. So it adds a capsule to my scene. And then you can see that it's going to, sorry, I've got an update right where my transform, okay, right where I need to see my computer's updating. So, all right, so I click on my capsule in my 3D viewport, or I can toggle between my objects over here from my hierarchy. And I can see that it's added a capsule. Its default position is roughly, I think, going to be half of its size, just kind of up from the 000 origin. So it's kind of creating a centralized capsule in my scene. I can change the scale here by hand if I want to, or the position. Again, W to get the transform objects. And you can move along, like in Maya, you can grab one of these handles at a time, or you can, let me see if I can zoom out a little bit and make it more obvious, or you can drag along planes. So if you wanted to drag along these planes together, you can click on that little square that is this kind of allows you to kind of move the object around on the plane laterally this way, or you could kind of move it in a circle up it and kind of in the x-axis direction, or you can grab it over here so that it will move along the y and z axis only, right? So those are easy ways to kind of move your object around in space at 2 axes at a time, or you can drag single axis at a time as well. You can, if you type in E, you'll get your rotational tools. Now that yellow circle is going to allow you to rotate. See how when I rotate on that yellow circle, all X, Y, and Z numbers change in my, my inspector? That's because it's rotating kind of in line with my perspective on the object. So my perspective view is whatever I've kind of, rotated around in my scene. It's not going to be a flat, it's not going to be perpendicular to my object, but I can rotate based on my camera view, right? And so now I'm rotating my object now based on this new view, and it's going to be rotating very differently, but it's always going to be changing that rotation on 3 axes. If I wanted to grab just a single axis, I can rotate my object on a single axis here using the X, Y, and Z handles, which are going to show up in your scene as color coded. So the blue circle around your object corresponds to rotating around the z-axis. So if you look at your orientation up here, if you imagine a line moving through your object kind of in line with that blue axis, that's what it will rotate around. So imagine if you stuck a pole through your object on the z-axis, it will then rotate that around that pole. Same is true, obviously, for X and Y. So if I grab the little red axis, it will rotate around the red pole here, and then Y, if I grab that Y position, it will rotate around the Y axis. And then R, if I type my hotkey R, that'll give me scale. So with scale, it's kind of like transform, but you can grab that center box and transform all 3 axes at the same time for uniform scale, or you can scale out in one direction at a time here. Boop, boop, boop. So those are your kind of transform tools in Unity. I'm going to reset all of these to 1, 1, 1 because of the way the asset bundles get packaged for Tomiko's augmented reality package. You can't have any transforms on them. It will mess up the coding. So you want to make sure that everything that you kind of everything that you create has all the transforms are set to 1. And I have to confirm with them that might be this kind of inspector transformation. There's a secondary transformation, and as we kind of move in through our asset bundle, that transformation specification for set to no transformation might only apply later, but just keep that in mind. For now, I think it's best if we just keep everything set to 1, 1, 1. All right, so I'm going back to, rotation, we probably want 0, 0, 0. And scale, we want 1, 1, 1. And we'll set 0, 0, and 0 for location. Okay. So Q, there we go, pan in. All right, so when I click on my capsule, you see my transform here. You see that I'm using a mesh renderer. Most of these we actually won't need to use under the inspector for our purposes for the AR VOS or the augmented reality. So Tomiko's has 2 different applications that she's written. One is for image-based triggering. Again, that's where the camera sees an image and then it activates the augmentation on top of it. That's the AR VOS. And then one is positional based. So when you have GPS and location services turned on your device, when you enter in a certain zone, something will get triggered in physical space. And that is called AR Poise. So when you hear me talking about AR VOS and AR Poise, that's what I'm referring to, are these 2 platforms, these 2 apps that exist as potentials for you and for artists to use in this project. So then the next thing that I'd probably want to do is create a new material for my object. So rather than applying a material onto the object, in Unity, you create new materials and then you can drag them onto the object. So under my materials tab, I'm going to go into my materials folder. And how are we doing? Is everyone kind of in line? Do I need to review anything else? Are we good? When I go into full screen mode, I lose my chat. Let's see if I can find it again. Somewhere. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I was giving a thumbs up.
Cool. Awesome. Yay, thank you.
I have to download my Unity another time because it like crashed my Zoom and I had to re-log in.
You might want to try, so like I found since everyone, like internet usage is heavy at all times, but I think especially at like 5 p.m. Pacific Standard is when the East Coast and Central Coast is starting to watch Netflix.
Oh my gosh.
So like downloads, if you can start them kind of like late our time or, you know, weekends, who knows what are going to happen on weekends. But like I do notice these evening times to be kind of peak internet traffic times. So that gets really slow. Okay, so great. I've got my chat up so I can keep an eyeball on that too in case anything comes up. All right, so under our materials folder in our project menu, I'm going to click on materials and then I can right click inside of this menu box and say create and then material, or I can also do the same thing where I click on the materials under assets, or no, where is it? Where are materials? And I forget, I always right click, so. I don't know. Do you all have a right click option?
Yeah, for me at least.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Maybe you can also do control click. So I know that there is a way to get into it through a menu option, but rather than have you guys watch me futz around with that. So either right click or control click, and I think it's the same for PC and for Macs. Then create and then material. And then I'm gonna name this, I'm gonna make an orange plastic. You all could make it an orange plastic with me and then make whatever you want after that. So same kind of nomenclature where you can't have special characters or spaces. So orange plastic, all one word. And I'm using that kind of standard camel caps. All right, so up now in my inspector, I can see that I have some, I have different types of rendering modes. I'm not sure what types of features will port into AR-VOS, so I want to play a little bit with that later. For now, I'm just leaving the rendering mode on the kind of defaults. This albedo, this is like our color. So if you click on the little color box next to albedo, you can get your color picker up here and move, you know, you can actually move like in Photoshop on the saturation, hue saturation box, and then you can kind of move your RGB values around the circle. I said I was going to make an orange, so I'll drag somewhere in orange, and that looks great. So now I can see that my preview over here is showing an orange color, and then I can bring things like smoothness way up. If this is a plastic, it's probably going to be a little bit smoother than the default, but not too shiny. You can do things like bring up the metalness, which is kind of like almost giving it a chrome. And I'm not sure if these bump maps or normal maps will translate into AR-VOS and PR Poise. So for now, we're just going to leave those as is. I don't need to mess around with any of these tiling or offsets since it's just kind of a standard color. So now I've just changed the color and then kind of given it a higher smoothness. And then I can take that color down here from my material and drag it onto my 3D object in my viewport. And now my 3D object has that color. And I could make a new, under game object, create a new 3D object called cube, and then I'm going to move it in space. Let's see here. And then I can drag the same material onto that cube, or I can do another, let's all create a new material. Right click and say create, and then material. And then I can make a new color, say blue, and change the saturation value. And then see metallic, make it a metallic. Somehow I lost some of that saturation, so let's try that again. Blue, there we go. And then I can drag that onto my cube. So I can also do things like, instead of using the color picker, these little bullets, you'll see this in Unity a lot. Anytime you see this kind of like circle with another kind of dot inside of it, these very tiny things next to a function, you can click on those things and it will bring up this select texture feature. So right now it just has like a bunch of these kind of defaults, but you can also do something like bringing in an image into your materials and then like drag that albeit onto an image. So I'm going to make a third object, so a game object, a 3D object. I'm going to make a plane, and I'm going to bring that plane way down, and that's my ground. And then I'm going to see if I can navigate through my Finder window. And let's see if I have a good image on hand. I'll use that. So I'm going to, so can you see my Finder window as well? So I'm going to just drag my image from my Finder window into my materials folder in my assets menu down here. And it's going to, I think I was too slow. Oh no, there it is. It's kind of bringing it in. So now my image is down here and I can see that when I click on it, it shows up as like a 2D image type. So now when I go back to my plane, oops, I'm gonna create, and create material. And then I'm gonna name this shark because that's part of the name of my piece, so I know what it is. So this, it's a part of the name of this image. So now when I go into shark and I click on albedo, this image pops up. So I can connect that into the color texture. And then when I drag shark up onto my plane, then it's going to bring in that image and onto my plane. Does that make sense? Do you want me to run through that process again? Yes.
Mine's not showing color. Mine just stays completely white. I'm not sure if I have it.
What kind of image are you using?
Well, I'm using I'm just trying to get the capsule to show the orange plastic material. But it's white right now. It's not really changing.
Can you, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Can you share your screen?
Mm-hmm. One second. Let's see. There we go. Can you see?
Yeah, cool. All right,
Yeah,
so go ahead and click into your materials folder. And then when you drag it on, drag that orange plastic onto.
Oh.
Yeah. I know it's like really hard to do this kind of remotely because like a lot of what I'm doing probably isn't super obvious, even though I think it is. So
I messed that up for sure. Okay, I'll stop sharing.
No, that's amazing. You know, when you guys are asking questions like this, you know, if this is getting recorded and then going out to potential artists, you know, it's very likely that they have the same questions. So, you know, it's great that you're asking because it's going to also give visibility to these processes that other people will likely have questions about.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you recording this or is this still Kurt recording?
It's Kurt recording.
Okay.
Are you going to want access to this?
Yeah,
after?
I was going to say if there's a possibility that we can get access just for, I mean, obviously the whole recording, but
a second.
Totally. Yeah. So this is also in my my Vuforia tutorial has a little like recap of the material stuff. So, okay. But I do think it would be super useful since this is what you all saw together to have access to that. And I'm sure that we can find a way to make that happen.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can you go through how you added the image to your new material again?
Yep. All right. And desktop 2. And share. There we go. All right. So I'm going to, let's see, plane. And delete it. I'm gonna, if you want to delete an object from your scene, you can right click and then delete. Or I think it's also going to be control click and then delete. So I'm going to delete that plane and I'm going to start from scratch. So first thing that I'm going to do is actually find the image and then bring it into my Maya project. So you can bring,
yeah, I think you're showing your own screen.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. No screen is safe. Must make sure. And now I've lost all of my UI. Okay, new share. There we are, desktop one. There we go. Yeah, now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so I just deleted, let me undo my delete. Can I? Let's see, edit. No, I don't have any. Okay, there we go. So I selected my plane and then I right clicked on it from my inspector, my hierarchy. I can also control click on the object from the outliner and then say delete. And so that's going to delete my plane. I'm going to start from scratch, and the first thing that I'll do is drag my image into my Unity project, and that is literally as easy as kind of just drag and drop. So you can do that from your file browser. I'm going to use a new image here, and I'm going to click on the image. It'll take JPEGs and PNGs for sure, and possibly TIFFs. I haven't tried that. Let's see. Will it take a TIFF? Yeah, it's going to think about it for a second. I might not have liked that. I might have broken it.
What was that?
Oh no, it brought it in. So I was testing a TIFF image to see if it would bring in a TIFF image, and it looks like it did. So I'm gonna bring in another JPEG because it's a little. I know it's a little bit smaller and probably more Unity friendly. For image textures in Unity, like Maya, you don't need the super kind of print ready high res images, and in fact that can slow down your performance. The lower res images tend to work fine, and I can't give you a good guideline in terms of scale because it really will depend on how large you want to display your image in VR. Because it really depends on how many pixels your image is going to take up in a screen. But if you can think about your device and find the kind of pixel resolution for your device and think about how many pixels you would want this augmented thing to take up in the screen, you can kind of do your best guess at a pixel resolution for the image itself.
I have a question. So like, you know how in Maya you can import like a shape that you create or like a scan?
Yeah. You can, go ahead.
You can do that here too, I would presume. But do you have to go through the same process of making sure that all the overhangs are cleared and that there's no gaps?
No, that's only for 3D printing. So, yeah.
So
So
I remember when I was trying to import a texture onto my 3D scan in Maya and it wasn't working because there was like, I guess, little gaps or whatever. Is that a problem that we would run into here also?
So that is, it's a different problem, and that's UV mapping. Okay. If you're using these simple game objects, that shouldn't be a problem. If you're using more complex objects, what I would do, and we can experiment with this a little bit, I'm going to show you in a second how you can drag your Maya files into Unity basically the same way we just dragged images in. Okay. So in that case, what I would do is do all the UV mapping in Maya. And that's kind of like using, we can cover that in a second, but that is basically saying, let's unwrap this complex 3D scan in a certain way. And this is actually going to probably be useful because it's likely with some of the artists that we're going to be working with, they might want to use scans of 3D objects. I know certainly when, Corinne was showing us some of her artifacts, one of the things that we were going to be doing in class together was 3D scans of those objects. So that would be a perfect kind of use case of this process.
Okay.
I'm trying to think if I don't think I've used color data from 3D scans directly into Unity. But yeah, that would be a workflow that I want to test out. So good question. But my workflow with that would be to do the unwrapping and the texturizing in Maya using the Maya default materials, and then bring it into Unity.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Right. So I've dragged my image into my materials folder, and then I would want to make a new material on which I will apply that image. So I'm going to right click and in the materials folder, or I can control click and say create material. And then I'll name this yoga because I'm a creative human. And then I'm going to click on that little bullet next to albedo and say, use the color data from this image that I've brought in for the color data. So albedo is basically like, what is the base color? So when we change it, we can change it on the color wheel, or we can give it an image to drive the kind of base color of the object. And you can still play around with shininess, etc. on your image, but the base color will be driven by this photograph. All right, so now I can go back into my scene, and under game object, I can create a 3D plane, and then I can drag that new material yoga onto the plane. So it's gonna drag the image on one-to-one. So you might not have like a perfect resolution of the object, right? It will get stretched out. So before you bring an image in, you might want to just do it by eye afterwards. If you're getting a stretched image, you can always change the shape of the plane. But that's also when you go into your material, if you click on the material again, that's also when you start getting into some of these questions about like the mapping, the tiling, and the offset, etc.
Is it fair to assume that the resolution in the preview is going to be the same resolution in the export? Or does it clear up?
So when you're doing, yeah, it's actually much closer in Unity than in Maya, for instance, right? So because in Unity you're trying to render real time, what you're seeing in this real-time viewport is very much like what you'd be seeing in the real-time. You can do things like, I don't know if we've talked about baking in Maya. Did we talk at all about baking?
I'm not familiar with it.
So baking is like saying, let's do a bunch of and this is something that, did I do? I don't know if I've done, but you can bake. Let's say in Maya, you set up a scene, you have like a sky dome, and then, multiple different types of lights with different colors, and you have really complex light bounces, and you're rendering glass. You can bake those textures, those kind of, those complex light bounces into a new image texture in your Maya scene. And frequently that's what they'll do when they're making games to get really realistic interior effects. But what that means is that the shadows won't change. So sometimes you'll have like a character, if you play games and you have a character, and the shadows around your character look really realistic. But then, for instance, like the shadow of the object, your character in the scene looks really kind of pixelated like this. That's because the complex shadows and the environment calculations have all been pre-baked. So they've been pre-calculated, and they're basically just a static image texture on your objects. They're no longer being calculated real time. Okay. So if you want a more like complex relationship of your kind of objects or reflections, you can bake those in, but they won't update, right? So in augmented reality, like your objects are probably gonna, like stay in a type of relationship to your viewer, right? So if you're using position-based augmented reality, can your viewer like walk around the thing? Or if you're using image-based augmented reality, your viewer will be moving their mobile device around the image to see different views of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on, you know, the user interaction with your objects, and are there going to be different are the objects animating next to one another? Does that kind of answer some of? I hope I addressed your question.
You did, and then some.
Okay. And then some. He's like I do, you know, you get me yapping and I'll just keep going. Okay. All right, so does the workflow for using an image texture on an object make sense to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
Wait, real quick. So you can't just like drag the object onto the plane per se. You have to like create a different, like this says yoga, like you have to create, or is that the plane?
So I can't just like drag the image because it's just an image. What I'm doing is I've created a new material, and then I'm using the image. Yeah, exactly. I'm using the image as the color data for that material.
Okay, gotcha.
And then I can take that material and then drag it onto like whatever object I want.
Cool.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to import a customized shape, would you have to place that in one of the asset folders, or would you be able to drag that onto the?
Yeah, so we need to bring it into the Unity project first. So let's do that now. So I'm gonna under my asset bundles, no, not under my asset bundles. I'm gonna actually under my assets create a new folder called create folder Maya or 3D imports, or yeah, I'll just call it imports. All right, so in my imports folder, I'm going to do the same thing where I navigate to a Maya project. So one that I just did right now, animation 1. I'm going to grab that .mb. So that's the Maya file, and I'm just going to drag it into that imports. And this actually can take some time, especially if it's a really large file with lots of animations and lots of objects in it. But it's going to basically just process that Maya file and then bring it in as is. So I can, here it is. So it shows up now under my assets. I can click on this little, actually first I can click on the top level of it and then preview my objects here. So it looks like the materials might not be showing up accurately there. I'll be curious. Actually, I'm just gonna drag it in my scene and see what happens. Oh yeah, so my materials like show in, but obviously it's a very different scale now. So can I move these independently? Yeah, so I can move each one of these spheres from my Maya project independently. But I'd want to probably obviously make sure that they're matching scale. So the way that I would do that is like, yeah, click on this and then, you know, just like type in maybe 0.5 and then 0.5. 0.5. Yeah, and that looks about right. So then it's kind of matching scale. And same, 0.5. 0.5. There should be some way. Can I? No, okay. Probably a way to force it into some kind of uniform scale. Okay. All right, so now I have these objects. I have to double check with Tomiko, but there are ways to bring in, I think Maya, yeah, so I have an animation on my objects. So it's weirdly in the preview in this kind of right-hand side down here under the inspector, it's showing the material on one of my objects as applied to both, but clearly that's not happening here. There are ways that you can add what are called animation controllers onto your project. We're not going to get into that today. For Hidden Histories, all of the animations that get packaged with your bundle will be controlled on the AR Poise or AR Boss side of the kind of workflow. So not in Unity. In Vuforia, we will add animation controllers, but for today, we're going to kind of not address the animation. But you can preview to make sure that the animations have come in with your objects here when you click on the top level. And you can see it brought in the sky dome, my plane. I have 2 spheres. These are the I guess they're, oh, I know, one of my spheres I think might have had an AI standard surface. So all of the Arnold-based materials that I teach you in 102, the 3D modeling, they won't come into Maya. They don't play nice with Maya's rendering engine, but all of the default materials, so Lambert's, the blends, the thongs, for instance, they'll come in beautifully with it. Okay, so I'm not gonna, but that's basically it. You drag your Maya project into your imports, and then you can drag each one of those, the objects on, and you can see that it brought in, let's see, this, my animation here, it brought that top level of the project when I dragged it into the scene, but you can always go in and delete out, like, let's say I don't want to use my, the plane that I brought in with my Maya file folder. I actually want to use the plane that I've created. I can do a couple different things. I can delete it out completely, or from the inspector window, this little checkbox next to it, I can turn it off, and it actually just like says, okay, we're just not going to include that in the scene, right? So this little checkbox says don't include that. So I could do the same thing for this sphere. I could delete it completely, or say let's just not include it in the scene, and then it disappears. Does that all make sense for everyone?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so the next bit is I've only done through the workflow a few times. So you guys get to see me try to remember how to do all of this. But I'm going to, Peter, who is Tamiko's partner and co-wrote the applications that we'll be using, provided a text-based tutorial. I'm going to share that with all of you now in the comments. And we're going to walk through it together. Okay. See that Kurt responded that he'll be providing a recording. Thank you, Kurt. Okay. All right, so there's the link here in the comments, and it should take you here. Is everybody able to navigate to this creating asset bundles? So you can follow along in the text tutorial. I'm going to walk through each step. One thing that you'll want is down here, and this is the code that we're going to add. So this is the C# code that I mentioned that Unity uses for things like interaction or all sorts of different applications. In this case, what this code is going to allow us to do is add a feature called create asset bundle, which makes a package that we can then upload to the augmented reality application that Tamiko and Peter wrote. So we have one here for iOS, or this is one, I'm sorry, this one here is what you would use for Android. You can see build target Android, and then this version of the code, the second one, is what you'll be using for iOS. Okay. So that's, again, you can follow along in the text-based tutorial or just follow along with me. I'm going to show you the process in Unity here. Okay, so we've basically, for page 1 and page 2, I think, and even down into page 3, we've done all of that work. So now we want to get into page 4, which is where he starts talking about the prefabs. So we need to turn our objects in our scene into prefabs. And the way that you can see, actually, this is technically a prefab in my outliner, because this Holberton animation one has that little blue cube. For the purposes of our project right now, I'm actually going to just go ahead and delete that, so that I'm only exporting my cube and my capsule. So we want to select all of the objects that we want to export as prefabs, and we can do that by dragging them into our prefabs folder. So you can select them from our hierarchy window, and then literally drag these 2 objects into our prefabs. Or maybe it only happens one at a time. Okay, that's fine. One at a time. I'll drag my plane. No, I want my cube, drag it into prefabs, and then my capsule. I'm going to do the same thing and then drag into prefabs. And then you can see the cube and the capsule change from white boxes in the hierarchy into blue boxes. The next thing that we want to do is select capsule, and then here, yeah, it's saying no transformations. So I'm gonna I'm gonna click on each one of these prefabs down in from my my prefab selector, and then I'm gonna turn all of the positional data off, and make sure so it's 0, 0, 0 for position and rotation, and make sure my scale is set to 1, which is essentially 100%. So the actual size of the object. And then for the cube, I'm going to do the same thing. Make sure it's 0, 0, 0, and that my scale is set to 1. So it does look like when I do that, that it's not actually changing the positional data. Let's see if I click on my cube. That's great. Yeah, so you can actually change the scale and the position of your objects in your scene, and then remove those positional translations down here in the prefab package, and your scene will retain all the transformations. So if you want to kind of see things in relationship to one another, you can do that. Okay, so the prefabs don't have any transformations on them. And then now we're going to want to go into our editor window. And this is where we're going to copy and paste that script that I just showed you. So we're going to create 2 folders. Even if you aren't packaging out for iOS or Android, let's just go through the workflow for creating those 2 scripts together. So the first one we're going to create, call it create asset bundles. So I'm going to right click and create and a C# script. And then I'm going to call it capital C REATE ASSET BUNDLES, and that's capital B. So I'm going to bring out, so we want 2 of those. So one is called create asset bundles, and then the second one is create iOS asset bundles. And it's a lowercase I and capital OS. So I'm going to do the same thing for that create iOS bundles. Right click in editor and create C# script, and then create capital O, capital S, iOS, and capital ASSET, B, capital B, UNDLES. And because,
Android,
yeah.
if you have Android?
What's that?
Would you rename it Android if you have a?
No, so the script that they've written, I think, was for Android natively, and then they added iOS. So we are not going to change any of the names because I think that there's other code on the back end side of the server that is looking for basically both the script that we're going to import into these and the backend code is probably looking for something named this. So we're not gonna change the nomenclature here. Yeah, so it's just create asset bundles and then create iOS asset bundles. But this default is for Android. So this create asset bundles is for Android and create iOS asset bundles is for iPhones and iPads.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to, does everyone have a script editor? So double click on that first one and it should open up, I think either, yeah, for me, it natively opens up into Xcode, but it should open up a text editor if you have one. Does that happen for you all?
Mine opens Visual Studio. Should I leave it like that?
No, that's fine. Yeah, yeah. We just need to copy and paste into it. So
okay.
Whatever text editor it opens, you can even edit it in like a text editor as long as it saves, back as a C#.
Really quick, Rhonda, Rachel just texted me and said that her Zoom's like on the fridge, so it kicked her out. So
no.
That's yeah.
Tell Rachel that she can email me and we can set up a time to review it, but that I'll also go over this again next class.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to delete everything that it imports by default. So just go ahead and delete everything and then go back in. Can you see the group chat window or is it invisible to you when I drag it over? Do you see that? No, I think Zoom probably makes it transparent. So regardless, make sure you go into the link that I sent out for the AR Poise documentation and scroll down to this first bit of code. So everything in between using system IO down to the last bracket, you can copy that. So I'm gonna, I'm press Command C, but you can also right click and copy and then paste it into the editor. So everything in between that using system IO and then the last bracket. And I wanna make sure that I am in the C# code called create asset bundles and that the last line says build target Android. And as long as it does, I'm gonna save that. For me, it's from Xcode, but for you, whatever text editor opened by default for you.
Oh, so, okay.
Yeah. I'm going to do the same thing for Unity in a second. For iOS, do you want me to?
Oh, so if we have iOS, keep the iOS one and then the.
We're gonna write both just so that there's no confusion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So do it for both, even if you have, the other device. So
the regular asset bundle is for Android, and then the other one will put the.
Yep, iOS.
Yeah, we'll include that in there.
Yeah, so I'm gonna run through that process too right now. All right, so that was the create asset bundles, the first C# that we made, that create asset bundles, that was for Android. The one that says create iOS asset bundles, I'm going to double click that one and then do the same thing. I'm gonna in whatever text editor opens up for me, I'm going to delete. And if you don't have a text editor installed like Xcode or Visual Studio, they're both free. So what I recommend is that you download Visual Studio if you're on a PC and download through the Mac App Store Xcode for Mac computers. Okay, so I've just deleted all of the code that came up automatically for free when you create a C# script. And then I'm gonna go back into my text tutorial here and this second bit of code. everything in between using system IO, and then this last bracket, 2 brackets below, build asset bundle for build target iOS. And I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to paste it into my text editor. And then I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to shut down my text editor. Is everybody there? Now when I right click or control click in my editor window, I should actually see, I should see 2 new scripts, and it might take a while for Unity to catch both, but this build asset bundles and then build iOS asset bundles should show up. Does everybody see those 2?
That's when you right click?
Yeah, so when I right click inside editor, it might take a second for Unity to kind of like interpret it. So what it's doing is kind of going through that editor and looking for C code to run, and it shows the build, building those 2 bits of code show up down here. Does everyone see that? Yay! Massive, you know, wow. Look, we've just modified Unity UI. That's really exciting. It makes me feel so powerful. I'm like, yes, I am now in the Unity editor. Tiny, tiny victories. I will take it where I can get it. Okay, so now we have this bundler capabilities. We need to connect. We need to set up some of our prefabs in order to run those exports. So I'm going to make sure that let's see, yes. Double check that I'm not missing a step. Yes, fantastic. Okay, so now we can go into our prefabs and then select our objects that we dragged into our prefab folders. So I'm going to select first my capsule. In my capsule menu, I should see down at the bottom here, let me move my little Zoom window. So under this asset bundle, it says none right now. I want to create a new, and I'm going to name it example bundle Rhonda. And then I think that's fine. So example bundle Rhonda, and then I'm going to create it for iOS only, not for Android, I think. Let me make sure I'm doing this right. Nope, that's all. Example bundle Rhonda. Okay, and I clicked off that. So now it says asset bundle example bundle Rhonda. Now I'm going to click on the cube, and from the asset bundle list, I can use that same asset bundler top level naming structure. So both of these, this capsule and the cube, if they get bundled, they're both going to get bundled to this new bundle called example bundle Rhonda. Nope, I'm sorry. So I was right. I thought I remember this. It's just added later in the text tutorial. All right, so actually, I'm going to select none for both my cube and my capsule. And then I'm going to say remove unused names. So for iOS, Peter has requested that if we're exporting for iOS, that we use an asset bundle name, but use at the end of that name, the letter I, lowercase, to indicate for iOS. So I'm going to do the same thing, except for example bundle Rhonda, and then I at the end of it. So I'm going to say, select my capsule and select new, and I'm going to call it example bundle Rhonda I. There we go. and then I'm going to select my cube, and then from the drop-down menu, that example bundle, Rhonda I, shows up. So I'm going to use that same bundle. Is everybody able to kind of move through that? So if you select in your prefabs folder, each prefab that you drag down there, under this menu on the bottom right-hand side from the asset bundle drop-down, you can add a new and then give it a name. If you're developing for an iPhone or an iPad, you're going to want to name your bundle, example bundle, your first name or last name, and then use an I at the end. For Android, you do not need to use that I at the end. Okay, so now you want to select, let's see, also select X. Okay, same. All right, so now we can select either one of these prefabs, and when we right click, we can say build asset bundle. It's going to build the asset bundle for anything that has that asset bundle name associated with it. So since both the capsule here, since both my capsule is associated with asset bundle Rhonda AI and my cube is associated with that same bundle, if I click on my capsule and then right click and run this build iOS asset bundles, it's going to include the cube because they're both associated with the same name. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to right click and say build iOS asset bundles. And then you can see you'll get usually a status bar. It's kind of compiling everything, and it just basically ran that script. So in that C# script, I'm going to go back into my editor. Actually, my asset bundles, I'm sorry. It's still thinking. We'll take a look at the create iOS asset bundle script. So what it's basically doing is saying by default, we're going to be building inside of assets, we're going to build iOS asset bundles. We've already named the script. This kind of create iOS asset bundles, and then it's going to be saving those bundles into our directory called assets asset bundles. So that's going to be where it shows up when it's finished, and then it's looking for, where is it? Yeah. So if there's a directory that exists that's the name of the asset bundle that's been selected, that is anything with the same name of that asset bundle will be included in this package. So that's why it's important that when we go down into our prefabs that both our capsule and our cube have the same asset bundle name, because in that line of script that's where it's looking for anything with that asset bundle identifier. So then it packages it and then it sends it out into asset bundles. And so now it shows up when I click on asset bundles, I have two things. One is just an asset bundles. We actually don't need that at all. And then an asset bundles manifest. And then we can see the second thing, which is my example bundle. When I click on it, I can see in the last, the directory file path that this is my example bundle Rhonda I. This is what I would then upload to my server and then attach the augmented reality apps that Tomiko and Peter wrote to this asset bundle. This, when I click on this manifest, it shows, let me move my windows here. When I click on this manifest, which is the asset bundle Rhonda I.manifest, this is going to show me that it's exported both my cube and my capsule prefab. Right? So this is where you can go in and double check that everything that you've wanted to be packaged in that asset bundle actually is packaged with it. So you can also, I think, let's see. Open, no, it won't show me there. I think, let's see, how are we on time? That's actually as far as I wanted to get today. Was everybody able to successfully create these asset bundles?
I was successfully able to follow along.
Me too.
Awesome.
Created it.
You got you got some asset bundles?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. We're gonna review the export process. So like the creating the C# code, the kind of packaging from the drop-down menu, and then ensure that we have asset bundles. We're gonna review that again next class. But this is kind of where I wanted us to be. So in terms of kind of initial workflow. So part 2 of this is going to be uploading the asset bundle to the server and then connecting through the ARVOS user interface, what are called different layers in the app. So for every project Tomiko has in the ARVOS app that she's hosting on her server, she creates a new layer. And so that's kind of each unique project, each unique, like the meditation app, for instance, is a layer. And then the project at the Whitney, where you walk outside onto the terrace and you see this kind of futuristic garden, that's another layer on the app. But what I'd like us to also do, and this might not work for everyone's devices because the foundational code that Tomiko and her husband used to write these apps are based on existing toolkits. For iOS, it's an AR toolkit, and that is only currently supported by iPhone 6s and above. So I have an iPhone 6. It actually does not work with this application. I just got on eBay eBay and purchased an iOS 6 so I can do some testing with it. But I hope some of you have these apps, but you can actually go on arpoise.com. And if you haven't done so already, it'll link you into these links so you can download the app. So for iOS or VOS, same thing. And then you can click in, if you download either for Android or for an iPhone or iPad, you can click here to see example triggers, and both this ARVOS and this image here, I'm not sure what the character says, will trigger different 3D objects. So you can test to make sure your device works with the ARVOS, and then also with the Poise. So you can both download the AR Poise, where are we? ARVOS home. Let's see. Oh yeah. Where's the AR Poise? Maybe it's just under AR Poise documentation. No. I can go back. Okay, so it's arpoise.com and ar.vos.com for the 2 different apps. And remember, the AR Poise is the positional based triggers, and then the ARVOS here, that's the image based augmented reality triggers. Has anybody been able to download those and get them working?
I downloaded the AR Poise one, but it had an error when I started doing it, but I also didn't see the link for the trigger, so I'm gonna try it out right now.
The Poise shouldn't need an image trigger. VOS is the only one that needs the image trigger.
Oh yeah, it gave me an error when it was trying to load up.
Are you an Android user?
I am.
So I think, let's see. I think the README might have. No. But I'm assuming they're using the same thing as display land. So let's see here. So Samsung Galaxy, what is your, do you have a Pixel or a Galaxy?
I have a Galaxy.
Which model?
S8.
Oh, cool. Okay, so hopefully, I'm assuming that they're kind of building based on the same same AR core, which is for the Android development environment. But Sabrina, were you able to use either one?
I have it opened, but I'm like learning how to use it.
So did you download the ARVOS?
For Unity or?
No. Here, so under the ARVOS home, did you download here?
I downloaded from the App Store, so I'm not sure. Let me see.
Is it the VOS version or the AR Poise?
How do I know? I'm just checking. It says Poise. It says Poise.
It says Poise? Okay.
Yeah.
So try. I know that they were having some issues with the AR Poise side of things. Try clicking into the ARVOS home and downloading the ARVOS. And when you download it, you can then click on this this link here where it says click here to see examples, image triggers, and then you can hold the phone up to those image triggers on the screen.
Thank you.
Yeah,
cool.
I had an iPhone 6S that I was testing with, had access to for a short time. I was able to get both the Poise and the VROS working with an iPhone 6S. I'd be curious if anybody else has been able to. Anybody else here have a iPhone 6 or more, or more recent? My ancient technology. Martin, were you able to get something running?
I'm testing it. Also, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh shit, where am I? Oh, okay, so when I go to asset bundles, under assets, it says the folder is empty. So I don't see the same,
you know, I think that is possibly because you haven't switched over to the right build settings.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, so I think that like that's like the last like little step. So it once you get the so Unity, when you go into Unity and then build settings, when you click on Android, do you get like an open download page next to your iOS option?
Let's see. I don't get, no, it says, oh yeah, it says open download page.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I downloaded the package. I just didn't want to start doing it during.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you might need
Zoom.
to do like a restart, etc. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can download it through that link, and then you might need to do like a restart. But you can save. So let's everybody before we lose. So make sure you go into Unity, and then under File, we're going to save scene. So just File Save, and then we're also going to then save project. So the project is the kind of larger Unity package, and then we've saved a localized scene within it as well. So now you should be able to navigate into your file system. So for me, that's Finder. my Unity projects are going into, where are my Unity projects going? I think hidden histories. Nope. Let me just double check. I'm gonna say open projects. So when I go into file and then open project, I can see my user path is under my downloads. Weird. Okay, so it's in AR Poise Master Unity and then hidden. So you want to make sure that when you go into your file manager, so I am in downloads, AR Poise Master under Unity, and then here's my hidden histories test. I can go into each one of these folders here. So my assets, and I see under my editor, here's my CS scripts. And then in my asset bundles, I can see both the asset bundles and the manifests. So fantastic, they have been saved. Yay! Yay! And then has anybody been able to get the tests going with their phones?
The app is working on my phone, but
which one did you download?
Poise.
So do you see the lotus ring around you?
It's not a lotus ring. It looks like Japanese characters.
I got
like
the
writing,
same one.
like bouncing around. Okay, let me.
Oh wait, I can't. Because you're looking at your. Can you share your screen?
No, it's on my phone.
Oh yeah, awesome.
Oh, nice.
Nice. That's cool. I downloaded a few days ago, and it was the lotus meditation, and so I needed to center on a lotus and stay there, and then the kind of the Buddha grew out of the lotus, and then kind of returned. What about you, Anna? Did you have one?
Yeah, I got the same one. The Japanese characters showing up. Yeah, I have an iPhone 7.
You got an iPhone 7.
If you double click the AR Poise, you can enter latitude and longitude.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if you enter like
a different location.
Yeah, let's see. I don't even know. How do you even type in latitude? Like, isn't it like point something point this like that?
You can. I don't know if you can pull the data out of the iPhone natively, but you can go into like Google Maps and then drop a pin, and it will show the lat and longitude.
Okay.
Was anybody else able to get either of the apps going? Can somebody try the ARVOS and see if the image-based triggers are working? Crystal. Hi, Crystal.
Hello.
Do you have a phone that will work with this?
I'm pretty sure the S7 works. Let me just pull it up again.
And Zay, what about you?
I was following along up until you sent us the link, and then I lost my internet connection, but
yay! Well, guess what? You are in luck because I'm going to review all of that next class. For right now, in the next 10 minutes, I wanted to double check to see if your devices worked with the augmented reality platforms. And so I've had folks going to arvos.com or arpoise.com. So let's see.
I haven't gone there, but I did download Displayland, but then I was reading on their page that they don't
support your phone.
Not compatible with Pixel 1, the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it might be the case. So I was just using their documentation because it doesn't specify in the ARVOS and ARPOIS, but I think that they're using the same core toolkits so as models. So yeah, your phone might not work. It's very likely that your phone won't work with the ARVOS and ARPOIS. I am going to find out. So for anyone that is on this call that has work that they've left at the school, there's going to be a sign up soon where you can sign up for 5-minute windows to go back to school to get your stuff. So I'm going to see if I can do something similar with John Oakes in the MLK library in the Clever Lab. He has a bunch of iPads that are compatible, which is what I was going to use for this demo in class. I'm going to see if we can get some iPads available to us so that we can start beta testing on platforms that we know are known quantities that work with this. So stay posted on that. And then he also offered to check out laptops to anybody that needed them. I don't know that you guys necessarily need laptops because, you know, in DMA we need them, but that there was that option that was being made available to students. So email me if you are interested in the laptop, and I'll let you guys know what I find out about the iPads.
I had a question about that.
Yes.
What if you have an iPhone, but then like your laptop's a window?
Yeah, I know. It should bundle okay, actually. So the reason that we have those two scripts, and I'm still testing that out with Tomiko and Peter, but I think that the bundle should still work regardless, be what they say is platform agnostic. But we're still testing that out. And that's one of the great parts of doing this with you guys first. It's because, you know, like you've probably run into that with me. I know when I was teaching the Vuforia version of this, right? Like all of my tests worked, but depending on your kind of configuration with your phone and your laptop, you know, it causes different types of problems. So you guys get to be the guinea pigs for everyone.
Yay.
But yeah, you should be able to bundle out, and hopefully by next week some of the server side stuff will have been figured out so that we can actually point to your directories and then get them kind of working inside of a version of the app. And that might, you know, because of the debug cycle. So, you know, Peter and Tomiko are in Munich, and it's a 9-hour difference. So, you know, I'll find a debug and then I'll kind of post it to them, and they get it 9 hours later, and then they can work on it whenever they can, and then they post it back to me and I get it 9 hours later. So the debug cycle is like 24 hours. So it's, you know, it makes things a little bit slower, but they've been amazing to work with, and they're really excited for us all to get this up and running. So are there any other questions?
I downloaded the ARVOS, and it says bundle www.arpoise.com, AB vector whatever error.
What kind of a phone do you have?
iPhone 10.
Vector error, and that's the ARPOIS. Can you take a screenshot?
SI.ace error.
Can you actually hold your phone? I'm gonna. I don't think I am sharing, right? Can you share your screen and hold your phone?
Yeah, I'm sick, so don't judge how I look, guys.
Just hold the phone up so we don't see you.
Hold on 1 second. You're not gonna be able to read it. It's at the very bottom. I can screenshot it on my phone.
Yeah, screenshot it. Yeah, do that.
I have to work on my phone.
And if you can't add it to the chat, you can email that to me. That's fine.
Also, can you email the link that you posted earlier?
Yes, yeah. So I'm going to send the link to that that workflow, the text-based workflow, and the link to the Vuforia pipeline. We're going to review both together next class.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions, comments? Anyone else have successful experiences downloading the apps and using them?
I got it.
I downloaded the apps, but it don't work. Sorry.
What Sabrina? What kind of phone do you have?
It was AB's Android. It's S8.
Okay.
It's Android. Yeah, so I'm
Okay.
like, I have it both open, but it says failed to to extract resources needed by L2CPP.
Okay.
So I'm like,
Oh, do you want me to? Sorry. Do you want me to share my screen now? I sent the picture to my laptop.
I'm gonna actually, share it with me now. I'm just curious, but also what I'm gonna do is add as an assignment for you all to try to download each of those apps, and then nice. Oh, wait, let me move my.
Get it at the bottom.
Yeah. So.
Oh, thank God! I thought it was just my phone.
It's doing that too.
Because I was like, AB, is it just part of my phone? That's like.
You're like, what did you do? Okay. Yeah, I know that they're still doing some updates and some work on this, but this would actually be really useful. So what I'm going to have you do, even if you've already downloaded the app and tested it, if you can submit to our debug log. So I'm going to ask each of you to enter into a spreadsheet your phone. Did each app work? And if not, what the error messages were. And if you can upload screenshots, I'll make a form submission so you can upload your screenshots of the errors too.
Sweet.
That would be great. I think that would be really valuable for Tomiko and Peter as well.
Okay, cool.
Yay. All right. Well, hey, I'm going to call this Zoom meeting another success for Art 178. So I want to, before we go, can we all just give a special thanks to both Corinne and to Kurt for joining us and sharing their experiences today.
Thank you
so much. And I'm going to end the meeting shortly. If any of you have questions, feel free to email me. I'm going to submit the link to the form to fill out. It's going to have links to both of the tutorials, the text-based asset bundle creation and then the Vuforia. That's going to go in through Canvas, so you all can submit through there. And then next week, we're going to work on the kind of production with Unity. If we can get the server side stuff figured out, obviously I'm going to kind of prioritize that. But if that doesn't get figured out before next week, then we'll start in on the Vuforia stuff. And then we'll talk about if you have any initial ideas for concepts for this kind of beta test of the hidden histories, how you would respond to the call for artists, which I think you guys have all seen, what those projects might look like. And we can workshop some ideas around that as well.
Cool.
Sounds good.
All right. Great job today, you guys. And I know that this online format can be strange, but you're like handling it really well. So I really appreciate your flexibility and accommodation with this.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you all. I'll see you next week at the same time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
All right.